Dear friends, you ready for another big night of Tanya? All right, so good evening, good evening. And we are continuing. We are going to be concluding chapter 26 tonight. And what is the theme of chapter 26? We've been learning about joy, the importance of joy. And what the Alter Rebbe told us is that joy is of critical importance, and we have to invest energy into being happy. Happiness cannot be something which either just happens, circumstantial. It can't just be something that, either it comes or it doesn't come. But we have to be actively invested in creating joy within our lives. A Jew has to be happy. If you're not happy, you are what's it called? A sitting duck, right? You're just vulnerable. You're out there in the open. There's no way you're going to be successful in life. A successful Jew is a happy Jew. And for that reason, you simply have to be happy. So we got to be happy. Okay. Now, what the Alter Rebbe told us is he's going to teach us different techniques, how to manage different forms of negative emotions. Because negative emotions are never good. Negative emotions make you feel bad about yourself, make you depressed and melancholic and lethargic and unenergized. There's no life within you. So you got to be happy. There's no doubt about that. Last class we learned about how to overcome the feelings of pain and stress, even amidst tragedy, even amidst tremendous challenges in practical material life, which was not an easy class at all last week, right? That wasn't at all easy. It was a very tall order. But this is the hard work. No one said it's easy to be happy. You got to be willing to train yourself, to meditate, to get yourself in the right space of mind, the right frame of mind. Today, we have a little bit more of a spiritual problem. What's today's problem? One of the most dangerous forms of depressing thoughts and negative emotions that could really send a person down this a spiraling loop of negativity and just a lot of negative feelings is the sense of guilt. Now, I know guilt, they say, is very Jewish. We're the masters of guilt, Jewish guilt, but it's not okay. It's not good. Guilt is not good. Even if it's stereotypically Jewish, it's not good. Guilt could be very, very dangerous. You know the joke? There's once a Jewish woman that she showed up for jury duty, but they kicked her off the panel. You know why? Because she insisted that she is guilty. All right. They say Jews, if they don't feel guilty, then they feel guilty that they don't feel guilty. So guilt is definitely stereotypically a Jewish problem. So today we're going to deal with guilt. What's guilt? Guilt is that you are aware of something that you did wrong, and that deep guilt and regret of past decisions becomes something that you see as a stain upon yourself. It makes you feel very bad about yourself. You have a very negative self-image. Because look how bad I am, and look what type of loser I am, and look what I've done, and I'm just such a bad person. Who knows what it is, and you could be really, haunted, really plagued by feelings of guilt. So guilt is a big problem. We gotta figure out how to manage our guilt. But at the same time, guilt is also a little bit of a more delicate topic. Because would you tell somebody, never ever feel guilty again? Guilt isn't good. It doesn't make you feel good. Just never feel guilty. Never have regrets. Never feel remorseful. Do you like such people? Is that a healthy thing? No, that's also not healthy. Somebody who never feels any guilt, I don't know, you're a psychopath, right? That's not healthy. So guilt is a little bit more delicate. It's a little bit more sensitive. On the one hand, we all understand that certain thing that's, guilt in moderation, in health, is a good thing, is appropriate. It's a sign of your humanity. On the other hand, it could also be a little bit of a dangerous. There's a certain danger to guilt, because there's so much negativity. So we have to navigate guilt properly. We have to really, really learn what is the nature of guilt, what are the pitfalls, what we have to be very careful of, very mindful of when it comes to going through remorse. And it's an unbelievable piece of Tanya. It's a very down-to-earth, very relatable, and it's something, today's Tanya is something we could do today, we could do tomorrow. It's so practical to life. The Alter Rebbe really, really gives us real clarity over here. But over here, we're starting to speak about a form of negativity, of negative emotions, which is legitimate, which is appropriate. In last class, when the Alter Rebbe told us about the depressing feelings of stress and pain, the Alter Rebbe said those feelings are inappropriate. No matter what's happening in your life, a Jew should build up enough resilience that despite whatever pain, you are not falling into depression. You are functioning. You are functioning as a joyous Jew, even amidst the pain. Which means it's not going to take away the pain. Pain is pain. Life is life. Life is hard sometimes. But you don't have a depressing day. You're not functioning on any level, despite whatever pain. So the Alter Rebbe in last week's class, in the earlier part of the chapter, says you have to reject these negative, depressing feelings that come with tragedy and really strong stress of life. No matter what the stress is, you have to be in a good space. So we totally rejected that. But the Alter Rebbe told us earlier on in the chapter that there's certain forms of negativity which are actually appropriate. The Alter Rebbe used the word, they are genuine sadness, genuine negativity. But even then, the Alter Rebbe said, the goal is happiness. The goal is never, ever sadness. Even if it's a good sadness, even if it's a warranted sadness, even if it's appropriate and healthy, that's never the goal. Even when the Torah tells us that a certain negative emotion, a certain negative experience is appropriate, the goal is always to move past it and to get to a place of joy. And today we're going to be meeting our first form. Let me just close my ringer here. We're going to be touching upon our first form of negative emotions, which is, or which could be, if it's done right, appropriate. It's healthy. But you got to do it properly. You have to manage it properly. And as the Alter is going to tell us in a moment, guilt is a very, very dangerous and toxic emotion. On the one hand, it's healthy, because if you never feel any guilt, that's no good. If you never feel guilt, then you're flippant about life. You're callous. You don't. There's no growth. But you got to be very, very careful. So how do you deal with guilt? Let us begin learning. Dear friends, middle of page 199. Part 3, navigating guilt, regret, and remorse. Okay. Says the Alter Rebbe, now we will discuss depressing feelings of guilt and regret over matters between you and God. Okay. Guilt about moral failures. That's what we're talking about over here. Moral and spiritual failures. So you look back at a period of life and you see that you failed. You see that you missed the boat on something. You messed up with something. And now you're feeling deeply regretful about it. Okay, says the Alter Rebbe, although such feelings may be appropriate, but you need to take some advice seriously to rid yourself of these feelings when they first surface. The Alter Rebbe tells us the first step. Now, we're going to have to understand why. But the Alter Rebbe says you right away reject it. Never, ever engage with feelings of guilt as they appear to you. Okay. Why not? We'll get to that in a moment. But let's talk for a moment about the guilt. There are many, many different areas of things you could be doing bad, doing wrong, and you can feel guilty about it. It could be anything. I don't know. You missed your wife's birthday. You forgot it. We're speaking over here about moral and spiritual failures. You're not living up to your life as a Jew, and you look back and you're not living up to being a good person, and you've caused harm, or you just simply you made bad choices. Now, no matter what the offense was, either if it was an offense between you and God, or if it was an offense between you and another person, you hurt somebody, you hurt them emotionally, you hurt them physically, you've caused damage, whatever it is. If you want to make amends, Jewish law actually tells you what to do. It's a very big part of Jewish law. How does one ask for forgiveness? How does one make amends after doing a wrong? So, for example, if you hurt somebody else, you need to ask them for forgiveness. If you hurt somebody else, you have to pay them back. So did you cause them loss? You got to pay them back. In fact, according to Jewish law, if the person you offended, if the person you wronged has already passed away, you have an obligation to bring a minyan to their gravesite. You have to go visit them in the cemetery and verbally ask them for forgiveness. Say, I'm standing here with a minyan, and I ask you to please forgive me. I've done this and this to you in your physical lifetime. It's a very serious thing. So there is what to do. But then there's the emotional baggage. Sometimes you've done something wrong, and you've done all the steps that you needed to do, which means pragmatically you've done your part. You've paid back, you've said, I'm sorry, you've gotten their forgiveness. But the emotional pain of regret sticks with you. And sometimes it could be very toxic. People eat themselves up from the inside over missed opportunities, over past failures. It could be whatever. And that is what the Alter is addressing over here, the emotional aspect. The constant just mentally going back and obsessing and bringing back to the fore your failures, what you did wrong, and look how bad I am. And it ruins your self-esteem, and it ruins your self-image. The Alter says right away, number one, get rid of it. I'll tell you a wonderful story. Want to hear a wonderful story? I could really say this in any of these classes, but here's such a wonderful story. So one of the claim to fames of the Chabad community when we were back in Russia in Soviet times was that Chassidim were arrested on a regular basis because spreading Judaism was illegal, teaching Jewish children Judaism was illegal, operating a mikveh was illegal. So it was only natural that we didn't give up. It's not easy to the Rebbe's really trained the Chassidim well, and it wasn't easy to crack a Chassid. And it's a great claim to fame that so many, I'm saying, tragically, too many brave young men and women died at the hands of the Bolsheviks, died at the hands of the communists for the crime of spreading Judaism. But we could talk about the history of that another time. Unbelievable history. But there was a chassid. His name was Reb Mendel Futterfass. I told you before about him. Mendel Futterfass. He was a very special chassid. He was very well known. And I told you a little bit about him. His job was he was arrested for helping Jews smuggle. He helped smuggle Jews out of Russia. He created false passports. And he spent, if I'm not mistaken, 18 years of his life in the Soviet Gulag. And he gave up his life just to help Jews, to save Jews. When Reb Mendel Futterfass was originally arrested, so before he was sent to Siberia, he was in a prison. He was in a jail. He was in a communist jail somewhere. I don't know. And he found out that there's another chassid who was arrested a year or two before him, also in the jail, in the same jail. They weren't in the same cell, but he knew that in this building there's this other chassid. The other chassid's name was Reb Moshe Veshetsky. So Moshe Veshetsky, also a young chassid, I don't know what he was arrested for, but something, they weren't smuggling drugs. They were simply operating a mikveh, clandestinely operating a cheder for children to learn Torah. Reb Moshe Veshetsky was already in jail for 2 years. Reb Mendel Futterfass was just there for maybe a few weeks, but he found out that he's there. So he found an opportunity to try to meet him. And it was when they went to the bathhouse. There were like different stalls where they let the prisoners every few weeks take a shower or something. And there was a little window, and he was able to talk. He was able to finally come into contact with this other chassid. So finally, Reb Mendel Futterfass in the bathhouse gets access to Reb Moshe Veshetsky through a little window. So he says, Reb Moshe, How are you feeling? Are you still happy? Which is such a special question, you know. What does one guy ask another guy in jail, right? What does one chassid ask another chassid? Are you still happy? You still besimcha? Do you still have the joy that a chassid needs to have? And the Moshe Veshetsky gives a long, deep sigh and says, how can I be happy? It's already been 2 years that I can't put on tefillin, 2 years that I'm not celebrating Passover, 2 years that I can't keep Shabbos. How can I be happy? Sir Mendel Futterfast says, Ramosha, don't let yourself fall into depression. Because as of now, the Soviets only imprisoned your body. But if you fall into depression, that means that they also are imprisoning your soul. Don't let them get your soul. You got to stay happy. Which means no matter what it is, you can't put on tefillin. But you got to be happy. It's a very special story, no? Says the Alter Rebbe, the first thing to do when you are experiencing guilt is reject it. Simply reject it. Now, 1 second. But I thought guilt is appropriate. The Alter Rebbe says it is appropriate, but not now. When it just appears to you, when it falls into your head, you must reject it. Don't answer that phone call. Don't answer that door. You know, it's like when you pick up the phone and you all of a sudden realize that it's like a robocall. So what do? I'll tell you what, I right away go take the phone off my ear and hang up. The second I see it's a robocall, I'm not engaging. I've got no time to waste on robocalls. Says the Alter Rebbe, when you realize that a feeling of guilt is hitting you, just hang up the phone right away. Reject it. In other words, the Alter Rebbe is telling you, don't ever fall into regret. You know, people say they fell into love. Fell into love. But in general, the Alter Rebbe does not believe in falling into emotions. A healthy person creates their emotions. You don't fall into emotions. You're not an animal. You're not a circumstantial being. We are active creators of our destiny. We create our lives. We create who we are. We create our emotional environment. You don't fall into things. So if you fall into regret, get yourself out of it. If you fall into guilt, get out of it. That's the first thing the Alter Rebbe tells us. Why? What's the logic? Why should you regret guilt as soon as you trip into it? Says the Alter Rebbe, because it is never good timing when it first comes to you. Let's read. And this is such a beautiful piece of Tanya. Timing is everything. Let's read. This is certainly true that you must reject the depression, the guilt, if this depression surfaces when you are in the middle of doing God's work. Imagine you're in the middle of doing a mitzvah. You're praying, you're learning Torah, you're doing a mitzvah, and all of a sudden, a thought of guilt. Oh, something I did 5 years ago, something I did yesterday, and all of a sudden, oh my, I'm such a bad person. Oh, I can't believe I did that. Says the Alter Rebbe, you're in the middle of doing a mitzvah. Reject it. Hang up the phone. Why? Explains the Alter Rebbe. Because any work for God must be with wholehearted joy. Whenever a Jew does a mitzvah, you got to do it with joy. So if you're doing a mitzvah, there's no room for sadness. So no guilt. Inappropriate. Why? Because I'm davening now. I'm just learning Torah. Whatever you're doing. It's Shabbos. It's a holiday. I can't be sad. So if you're in the middle of doing Jewish stuff, you're serving God, you're doing God's work, for sure you have to reject it. It's bad timing. But now says the Alter Rebbe, but what about if you're just doing your own business? You're just doing you're minding your own business, your own leisure. You're eating breakfast. You're resting in bed. You're resting on the couch. You're relaxing. You're drinking a tea. You're out playing golf, and all of a sudden a feeling of guilt comes to you. Maybe that's a good time to experience the guilt. Go through the feelings. Says the Alter Rebbe, no, also bad timing. Why? And this is very powerful. This is a massive foundation here. Continues the Alter Rebbe, but the same even applies for a business person involved in worldly affairs. You're not doing Judaism right now. You're just doing life. If you suddenly find yourself depressed or concerned over matters between you and God in the middle of your business, we're on page 200, This is definitely a trap of the Yetzer Hara, aimed at pulling you down into a pleasure-seeking state afterwards. Heaven forbid, as is known. It's obvious. For how can a sincere sadness due to love and awe of God appear in the middle of your business? Let's unpack this. This is massive. We usually think that guilt is good, because guilt shows that I'm a caring person. If I feel guilty over something I did wrong, that is a sign that I'm a good person. So we would usually I think common wisdom is that when you feel guilty, that's coming from a good place. It's coming from your conscience. Says the Alter Rebbe, no. Guilt could be a real, sinister trap. What's the trap? Here's the way it works. We all have a Yetzer Hara, which they translate as the evil inclination. It is the impulse of the animal soul. The animal soul loves pleasure. The animal soul wants you in his control. The animal soul does not like when you're living a good life, a successful life, a happy life, a Jewish life. The optimal state that the Yetzer Hara wants you in is feeling bad about yourself. You want to know why? Because when you feel bad about yourself, that is when you are so susceptible. That's when you are so vulnerable to making bad choices, to falling into just poor choices that are pleasurable in the moment, but in the long run are really bad choices. And the Yetzer Hara loves that. Because when you are weak, when you are emotionally weak, when you have a low self-esteem, he could get you to do whatever it wants. A strong Jew is a Jew who knows how to make good choices, and who knows how to tell the Yetzer Hara, no, we're not going to do this. So what does the Yetzer Hara do? How does the Yetzer Hara get a successful Jew, a strong Jew, and ensnare it? How does it get back control? This is what it does. The first thing it does is it gets you to do a little sin, one that's easy for you to do. He gets you to trip on a little sin, which we all face those moments. Even when we're committed to doing a mitzvah, to being a good person, we make little mistakes, right? We make little poor choices. But listen to this. The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, the sin that it just got you to do is not the end goal. That is only the first step of his scheme, of his plot, of his trap. Once he got you to do something negative, he then comes the next day with guilt. Let's feel bad about it. And the guilt is what he's after. You know why? Because when you feel guilty, you start feeling bad about yourself. And when you're feeling bad about yourself, you're not going to be in a position to say, I'm going to grow today. You're not in a position of saying, I'm going to be strong today. When you feel all guilty and down about yourself, you know what you start saying about yourself? You say, I'm a loser anyways. You say, I'm weak anyways. Who am I fooling? I should be a good Jew. I did this yesterday, and I did this the day before. Guilt could be a terribly vicious cycle, a fatal vicious cycle that makes you do one bad decision, and then you feel even more guilty, which makes you do another bad decision, and even more guilty. Why? Because when you feel guilty, you don't feel good about yourself. And when people don't feel good about themselves, they try desperately to find things that will make them feel good for a moment. We try to pacify ourselves. And we make poor choices because we're looking for the instant gratification to ease the pain. Let me feel good about myself. Let me experience something pleasurable for a little bit. But all that does is create even more shame and more guilt. Oh, what did I just do? So you're feeling even worse about yourself. And then you do even worse things. And then you feel even worse about yourself. It's an endless cycle. And it's unbelievably dangerous. The Alter Rebbe tells us, and this is a big idea in Hasidic thought, guilt is the number one strategic tool of the Yetzer Hara to pull a Jew down. When there is a successful Jew, The most effective tool to get this Jew depressed and to lose all of his energy and strength is send him down the loop of guilt. Says the Alter Rebbe, know that the trap is out there and watch out for it. Don't fall into the trap of the Yetzer Hara to start feeling guilty. It's so powerful because, again, we usually look at guilt as something which is like a sense of self-righteousness. Sometimes people like even feeling guilty because, look, I'm a good person. I did something wrong, but at least I feel guilty. Right? I'm not a total animal. I'm not a total jerk. I even feel bad about it. So we sometimes like pat ourselves on the back. No? Like, oh, don't worry. I feel bad about it. The Alter Rebbe says, no, don't feel bad about it. The whole feeling bad itself is a total, terrible trap. It looks like it's righteousness, but it's really a trap. How do you trap a mouse? When you have a mouse running around your house, you got to clean out shop. What do? So you have to put out a trap. But then the trap itself doesn't work. What do you need? You need a bait, right? So what do you put out? The cartoons say you should put out cheese, but that's false, right? Mice don't actually like cheese. You put out peanut butter. And you fool the mouse that I want to feed you. You fool the mouse that I have your best interest in mind. Look, I'm putting out your favorite food. Come eat. But really it's just a way to clamp down and trap it. The Yetzer Hara does that too with all of us with guilt. It says, I'll come looking very self-righteous. It comes dressed up like a rabbi, with a hat, with a tallis, with a big jacket, a big frock. Let's feel bad. Let's feel guilty that we sinned, that we did bad things. Let's feel bad about it. The Alter Rebbe says, don't bite that piece of cheese, even if it looks holy, even if it looks righteous. It's a terrible, fatal trap. And there's many stories in Jewish thought that sometimes the very beginning of the failure of great, strong, and successful Jews was they did one thing wrong and they felt horribly guilty about it. And that itself, the deep depression and shame that came from the guilt, sent them on a downward spiral. And it just snowballed from there. Guilt kills people. The Alter Rebbe says, don't bite that bait. Whenever you fall into guilt, you should know this is a death trap. Get out of there right away. And the Alter Rebbe says, very, very simple. You're in the middle of doing your business. You're in the middle of playing golf. You're in the middle of eating breakfast. You're doing your thing. All of a sudden you feel guilty about what you did yesterday. All of a sudden you feel guilty about what you did last year. Tell me, says the Alter Rebbe, where's that guilt coming from? What precipitated this guilt? What made this guilt come into your head? You're doing your random business, and all of a sudden, from left field, the feeling of guilt comes to you. The Alter Rebbe says, it doesn't make any sense. If you're telling me that you've just studied a lot of Torah, and you've become a lot more spiritually sensitive, and you've deepened your relationship with God, and then you started feeling guilty, okay. That kind of makes sense. There was a precipitation over here. Something created this sense of guilt. But if it's coming out of nowhere, the Alter says, I promise you, it is certainly a trap from the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara does not like that you are in a good, strong position. The Yetzer Hara does not like that you're happy. It doesn't like happy Jews. Because a happy Jew is a strong Jew. And a happy Jew does not listen to the inner impulse for weakness. So the Alter Rebbe says, whenever you start tripping on guilt, whenever you feel that you just fell into guilt, I fell into love, you fell into guilt, get out of it right away. It is never, ever good in the moment. Which means guilt could be good, but it is never good in the moment. So the first tip the Alter Rebbe tells us is simply, never, ever fall into guilt. If you want to go through the experience of guilt, regret, remorse, that is something that you need to do later. Never when it feels like it's coming to you. So with this introduction of the danger of guilt and the idea that we can never ever fall into guilt, the Alter Rebbe says, and now I'll teach you the formula. how to go through regret and remorse in a productive, healthy way. We want to make sure we're doing this healthy. As we said, guilt is important. A healthy person needs to feel guilty. A healthy person needs to feel remorseful over previous bad decisions. So it's a good thing. It's also a horrible thing. It could be horrible. It could be a good thing. It could be a deathly trap. Which one is it? So the author says, I'm going to give you the formula. If you follow this formula, guilt will always be healthy. But the key is you need to be very, very much in control over any negative emotions connected to guilt, regret, and remorse over bad decisions of the past. So the author is going to give us something which is so, so beautiful. I'll just tell you like this. There was once somebody who was, he was a helper by the Rebbe's house. A simple Jew. And there was a holiday, and all of a sudden he discovered that he did something by mistake, and he violated the holiday. He did something which the Torah says you're not supposed to do on the holiday. And he did this in front of the Rebbe. So he very visibly got very shaken as soon as he discovered what he did. And his whole mood changed. Like it sucked the air out of his lungs. It just deflated all of his tires. Like he just became very depressed, instantaneously, because he just discovered that he did this horrible violation, which he would never do on the holiday. The Rebbe told him, stop being depressed. One sin cannot correct another sin. So you did a sin. So now you're going to do another sin? So now you're going to get depressed? Which means depression is not literally a sin in the Torah, but it's a negative thing. Right? One wrong doesn't correct another wrong. So you did a sin. But it doesn't mean that now you should also be in a bad mood. Never fall into guilt. So what do? Let's read this. The author is going to give us 4 points. Each of these points are very, very profound. Let us begin. Page 200. The formula for productive regret and remorse. So, says the Alter Rebbe, whether this sadness hits you at a time when you were serving God by learning Torah or in prayer, or whether it occurred spontaneously at a time not designated for such tasks, you need to take this to heart. So no matter when the guilt comes to you, this is what you need to do. Number 1, schedule. That's number 1. By the way, these titles and these numbers is my addition. The Alter Rebbe doesn't put that in the Tanya, right? You see, it's a different font. Number 1, schedule it. Says the Alter Rebbe, now is not the time for authentic sadness. Whenever you fall into guilt, it is never the right time for this to be productive and healthy. Now it is not healthy. Says the Alter Rebbe, it's not even the time to be concerned about grave sins, heaven forbid. I don't care how serious of an issue you've got that you're guilty about. Now is simply not the time. Which means I don't care what you did yesterday. Right now you got to be happy. But I did something so horrible. You don't want me to be guilty? The Alter Rebbe says, no. You could be guilty about it. Schedule it. Don't let it hit you over the head in the middle of nowhere. Schedule it. Take out your phone. Look for a clean evening. And say, you know what? This Thursday evening at 8:30 p.m., I'm going to make a half-hour window, and that will be personal introspection time. Schedule it. Let's read what the Alter Rebbe says. Rather, for this, you need a designated time and the right situation when your mind is in a settled state. So number 1, designated time. Never, ever start getting all into guilt mode out of nowhere. It has to be something that you do. Schedule it. Designated time. It has to be the right situation, which means you need to be healthy. You need to be in a good space. You got to be in a generally happy mode. If you're a mess, if you're emotionally a wreck, if you're suffering from low self-esteem and you're already in a bad place, you're probably not in the right situation to be experiencing guilt. And your mind needs to be settled. It's interesting, just in this past week's class, in the Advice for Life course, This is what the Rebbe wrote to this young man. I think it was the first letter of the class, right? A young man tells the Rebbe that he's plagued by just terrible thoughts of guilt over past failures and horrible things he did earlier on in his life. And the Rebbe says, you got to get rid of these emotions. You're not in a healthy place. You have to distract yourself with other healthy stuff in life. And the Rebbe says, you'll know when's the right time to revisit the guilt, but not now. Which means you have to be healthy. You have to be settled. It has to be the right situation. And the biggest idea here is the guilt cannot be controlling you. You control the guilt. You don't fall into guilt. You don't fall into regret mode. It has to be a process that you scheduled, and you are doing this. You scheduled it. Number one, and make sure that you're healthy. Make sure that you're in a good frame of mind. You could properly deal with your problems. It's okay. Dealing with your own problems is a very good thing to do, but just make sure it's being done healthy. Make sure it's being done productively. There's also a very key idea. The Yetzer Hara is not looking for productive guilt. The Yetzer Hara just wants you to just become an emotional wreck. The Yetzer Hara wants you to become depressed. What's going to happen if the Yetzer Hara comes and throws at you guilt? Let's think about what we did last week. Can you imagine if you tell the Yetzer Hara, say, thank you, I appreciate your concern. Right now I'm busy, I've got a life to live, and I got to be happy. If you want to talk about what we did last week, I've got an opening this Thursday night at 8:30. Let's meet then. I could assure you, the Yetzer Hara will not show up to the meeting. You want to know why? Because he doesn't want to talk business. It's a waste of... The Yetzer Hara wants to just get you depressed. If you're in control of the situation, he failed. He's not even going to show up to the meeting. Like, can you imagine if you get a spam call and you tell the person, yes, let's meet up with my lawyer at a coffee shop? Are they going to show up? No way. They're scamming you. The moment you show that you're in control of the situation, they're just going to drop you. So the Alter says it's a very good tactic. Never, ever bite the bait right away. Schedule it. When you schedule it, that's what allows you to be in a place of health and a place of control, and this will allow the process of remorse and regret to be healthy and authentic. So that's step number one. Step number one is simply schedule it. It's such a powerful piece of advice. Before we go on, just think about our own lives. Can you imagine if we would, instead of experiencing guilt, we would schedule the guilt? I think it would change our lives. Instead of having a bad day because of whatever happened to us, we would say, no, today God needs me to be happy. And yes, I do need to go through some inner soul searching. I do need some introspection, but I'm going to do it on my terms, on my schedule. I'm going to decide when we're going to do that. It changes your life. It makes you productive. That's number one. That's point number one. Point number two. It has to be true remorse. Let's read what the Alter Rebbe says. There's a very deep concept here. What do you do at your scheduled time? Says the Alter Rebbe. At that time, you will contemplate the greatness of God against whom you have sinned. That way, your heart will be broken with genuine bitterness. This time and practice is explained elsewhere. Point number two is to make sure that the introspection and the soul searching is healthy. What's healthy? You know, when people suffer from guilt and regret and remorse, there's two attitudes. One is a good attitude, one is a bad attitude. One attitude is, I feel so horrible. I have a good friend and I hurt them. I feel horrible. I shouldn't have done that. I hurt their feelings. I hurt our relationship. I feel so broken that I've done something to hurt this very precious relationship. That's one attitude. The other attitude is, I'm such an idiot. I'm such a loser. Look at me. Now I have no friends because I did stupid decisions. One is all about you. which is not healthy. That's just self-obsessive. And one is about your responsibility to others. One is healthy. One is outward. One is considerate. You're not just thinking about your failures, you're thinking about the pain you've caused others, the damage you have done. That's the difference between regret and remorse. In the English language, regret is all about yourself. It's what's the word for it? When you put yourself down. What was that, Lewis?
Self-absorbed?
Self-absorption, but even self-effacing, right? Is that the word? Like self-deprecation. Like
Yeah.
you're just you're putting yourself down. I'm such an idiot. I'm such a loser. And now and now look at me. I have all these missed opportunities. No, no, no. The Alter Rebbe tells us here, what should you do? Grow spiritually. Meditate about God. Just think a little bit about who am I? What does God mean to me? What is my mission here on earth? And realize that your past decisions were not okay. Be at a place of genuine bitterness. Feel bitter over your decision. That's healthy. That's healthy. To truly understand and feel how what you've done, the choice you've made, was a very poor choice. That's healthy guilt. I've done wrong, I understand why it's wrong, and I feel the pain of what I did. When you have that, that's called true remorse. When you have that, you're ready for step number 3. So let's just understand what's happening over here. Step number 1 is you push away the guilt. Step number 2 is you scheduled it. Step number 3 is that during your scheduled time, you meditated about the greatness of God. You've heightened your spiritual sensitivity, and now you feel the bitterness of your past decision. Now you're ready for step number 3. Containment and resolution. Continues the Alter Rebbe, there it is also explained that immediately after your heart is broken, at those designated times, you should not dwell on the feeling. Rather, you must discard the sadness from your heart entirely. You must believe with complete faith that God has removed your sin and that He is very forgiving. So again, schedule time, you're experiencing the true understanding and the true bitterness of the remorse, and then you stop. Why do you stop? Because you've shown God that you regretted what you did. You ask God for forgiveness. And then, and this takes a lot of faith, you let go of the pain. You let go of the shame. You let go of the past. And you say, now I'm healthy. Now life is good. You want to know why? Because God forgave me. That sin now is behind me. And now I can be happy. Now life continues. We are not going to be dwelling on this. We're not going to be marinating in all this depression. But we did it, and we came to the point of resolution. God forgave me. And therefore, life moves on. Which takes a lot of faith. It takes a lot of faith. You have to really have faith that God forgives us. If we did something wrong and we sincerely feel the remorse, God forgives us, and it's over. There's no need to ever think about it again. It is over. Isn't that powerful? It takes a lot of faith to believe in yourself. It takes a lot of faith to believe in God and to have faith in God, which allows you to have faith in yourself. To really tell yourself, I don't need to ever think about this again. I don't need to ever feel down about this again. The past is in the past. It's over. God forgave me. You know, the Alter Rebbe adds here the words, and He is very forgiving, which are words that we say in the high holiday prayers. V'rav l'sloach. We don't just say that God is forgiving. We say God is very forgiving. What does it mean, very forgiving? It means, just as God is infinite, so too God's forgiveness is infinite. You know, by us, any of our human attributes are limited, which means, let's say we're kind. Even if you're kind, your kindness has a limit, right? At a certain point, it'd be like, you know what? You've played me out for too long. I'm not being kind to you anymore. Same thing with forgiveness. A normal, healthy person will be forgiving to people. You did something wrong, I'm happy to forgive you. But can you imagine if somebody comes back to you tomorrow, does the exact same thing, and then asks for forgiveness again? You say, all right, strike two, but I'll forgive you. Day number 3, does it again. Oh, please forgive me. Hey, 1 second. You're becoming a repeat offender over here, huh? What do you think? You can play around with me over here? You want me to forgive you for the same thing every single day? I'm not forgiving you anymore. The amazing thing about God is that God is very forgiving. He'll never stop forgiving. Even if you ask for forgiveness, you do it again, God will forgive you again. You do it again, God will still forgive you. To no end. God has infinite patience for forgiveness. And the Alter says you need to believe. It takes a lot of faith. That when you sincerely show God that you are experiencing remorse, God forgives you. And don't doubt yourself. Don't just say, I don't know, maybe my tshuva was not good enough. Maybe I didn't feel the pain deep enough. Maybe I needed to think about it again. No! Get it? Just, you came to the point of resolution. It's over. Never think about it again, says the Alter Rebbe. Meeting is over. And when the meeting is over, the topic is closed. Close it and it's over. And that leads us to step number 4. That then you could be back to joy, back to productivity. And the chapter concludes, and that itself is the genuine joy of closeness to God that comes after the sadness as mentioned above. Then you could be happy again. Nothing, you have no weights on you. You have nothing heavy that's pulling you down emotionally. You're a free man again. I'm clean. I have no need to worry about this old past. I no need to worry about any skeletons in my closet. I've done the process of guilt. I've done the process of remorse. It is over. So these are the very simple steps, which are so simple but unbelievably profound. Never engage in guilt right away. Instead, schedule it. You got to contain it, be in control of it. Make sure you're in a good, healthy space. Experience true remorse. Think about it, internalize the pain, internalize the damage that was done. Genuine bitterness. Immediately when you experience that, it's over. God has forgiven you. It is over. You have to have a lot of faith and tell yourself firmly, it is over. And resume a joyful life as a Jew. Which is very interesting. There's a Chabad tradition that Yom Kippur, which is, right, of course, the most serious day on the Jewish calendar, it's a day of atonement. It's a day that, yes, we ask God to forgive all of our sins. Yom Kippur concludes on a very joyous note. The Rebbe used to do this. At the very end of Yom Kippur, there was a 180. The environment went from somberness to joy. The Rebbe used to conclude Yom Kippur with a very joyous march, a tune of victory. And the Rebbe used to stand up on his chair and lead the whole synagogue. 25 hours of fasting, the emotions are very high. Yom Kippur with the Rebbe was not a simple day. Spending an entire holy day with the Rebbe. And the Rebbe just created this storm of joy. Yom Kippur does not end on a sad note, even though we had to face our demons. But it concludes on a joyous note. I saw a letter, unbelievable letter, a very short letter from the Rebbe to a young man. This young man was depressed about bad decisions he made in the past. I don't know what they were, but he wasn't functioning properly. He was in depression because of guilt. The Rebbe wrote to him, this guilt is totally unfounded. Throw it away because it is not true. All of these sins that you are still guilting yourself about, this past Yom Kippur, God forgave you. Those sins are gone. There's no need to have to experience guilt anymore. It's over. It's behind you. God forgave you. You've moved past them. Sometimes God forgives us and we just hold on to it anyways. But it's dangerous. It's not even true. Isn't that amazing? So the key of this chapter, of this little piece from today, short and sweet piece of Tanya. Guilt could be healthy, but be in control. If not, it could spiral totally out of control. Guilt, remorse is something which has to be scheduled, contained, in a controlled environment, And it's not meant to be a prolonged process. It's very short. A half hour. Turn off your phone if you feel you need to do it. Introspection. Connect with the bitterness. Learn a little bit. Meditate about your relationship with God. Tell God, I understand. I deeply feel that what I did was wrong. I don't want to ever do this again. Please forgive me. And it's over. It's amazing. It's over. God has forgiven you, and resume a joyful life. And as the Rebbe also once wrote to somebody who also wrote that he's suffering from a lot of he just has a horrible self-esteem, and he can't take himself seriously spiritually. He doesn't feel empowered to grow spiritually because of a lot of guilt over past decisions, and he's always tripping over it. So Rebbe tells him, you have to tell your Yetzer Hara that you are not a private investigator, and you are not interested in history. You're a Jew, and you've got a mission from God, and you have work to do, and you have no interest in dwelling on the past. So Rebbe says, give yourself permission to move past the past. Give yourself permission to embrace life and to live it with joyfulness, with wholeheartedness. And okay, if there's a need to have to deal with some old baggage, it's a process. Do it, schedule it, contain it, but over. We're not in the private investigation business. We don't have to uncover and dwell and think about every single past decision we've ever made. It's interesting, the Rebbe writes that you're not a private investigator. You don't have time for this. You've got a job to do. We got to be healthy, happy Jews. That's our job. And dear friends, that is tonight's Tanya. The secret, the Alter Rebbe's very, very pragmatic formula to how to make sure that even regret, which is sometimes warranted, is done in a way which is healthy, done in a way which is conducive to us as Jews to be healthy and happy and strong. And with that, dear friends, we conclude chapter 26 of Tanya. And next week, chapter 27. Next week's topic is shame. This week is guilt. Next week, chapter 27 is shame. So you see here how the Alter Rebbe has taken us through every single form of negative psychological emotions and giving us the healthy Tanya attitude that we need to be able to be in control of our lives. And even if there's negative emotions, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, sometimes they're appropriate, sometimes they're inappropriate, but it's always being done with a sense of health and a sense of joy. We always want to make sure we're happy and joyful and that we're in control of our lives. And dear friends, I want to thank you all for joining. This is a very special topic, no? And with that, we conclude. I want to wish you all a wonderful, wonderful evening. And we'll see you all very, very soon. And Zaygesund, everybody. And Joel, l'chaim, l'chaim.
L'chaim, l'chaim. Right.
L'chaim to life, to joy, to health, and to happiness.
We'll see you Wednesday night.
And to learn. We'll see you all Wednesday and then next Sunday. We got lots of good stuff coming up.
Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi.